Hi, everybody. This is the session Exposure Photography as a Tool for Public Engagement. We've got a great group of speakers for you today. But first, I'd like to thank HRI for letting us have this session because photography doesn't often get a look in on these kind of things. And I also especially like to thank the sponsors of this because without them, this wouldn't be as accessible as it has been. We've got people who don't normally get to conferences who've been able to come to this for free, and that's because of the sponsors. So make sure you go and have a look at all of their stuff. We're going to be talking about photography as a tool and photography as a way of convincing the public that harm reduction and that the kind of work that we do day to day is worthwhile. So we've got 5 speakers, four and myself, and they are Graham McKinnon, Violet Modi, Craig Harvey, and Sandra Calagino. They're going to be talking about everything. We're on 5 different time zones where we've got one guy who it's 6 o'clock in the morning for him tomorrow. So, just bear with us on the fact that we're working across the most diverse range that we can of people here. Okay, so we'd like with that just to introduce the first person, which is Graham.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
On mute. Oh, the slides up, Lucy.
It said the host muted you.
No, you're not muted.
Oh, you can hear me okay?
I don't know if this... I can hear you. I'm just wondering, are the slides coming up at all? Or... There we go. And I'll go.
Are my slides coming up? Hi, my name is Graham McKinnon, and the project that I'm showing is a series of images taken for Vital Strategies overdose prevention program. And what we really did with this project is I collaborated with my wife, Susan Stellan, and we used image and text, and we photographed and interviewed people, in the harm reduction world, but, people that are often overlooked, people on the front lines, people that are out there every day interacting with people who are drug users, people who are directly affected, people who are service providers, and try to get, their point of view and what it means to them to be engaged in this sort of work, And this is Keith from New Haven, and his quote is, "I always carry Narcan in my backpack, the nasal and injection one. I have Narcan 9 people this winter. Unfortunately, one didn't make it, but the other were able to survive. So I was grateful that I was able to save a life. Without that Narcan, they might not have made it. I don't like seeing someone overdose, but you can't turn a blind eye out here because it happens and people need help." I've done a lot of work around the harm reduction, safe injection sites, needle exchanges, all that sort of stuff. But this project that I did with Vital Strategies was really important because we did get to meet with people and collaborative work, talk with them, interview them, photograph them. And then, it's very, very important for us to go back to people and say, this is a quote we're going to use. How do you feel about it? Do you feel this represents the work you do or what you would like to really say? Because sometimes we say things in interviews or we say things flippantly or really quickly and then we get misquoted or we get quoted out of context and it gets, used. So, for us, the theme of ours is collaborative storytelling and art, media and advocacy. And this project went on to be 10 months of photographing people in 4 different states. We used it, as you'll see in the last photograph, as a, public art exhibition. But if Nigel, if you could move on to the next one. Thank you. This is Brian. He works for Wellness Services in Flint, Michigan. He's a harm reduction specialist. And this might not be the greatest and most eye-grabbing photograph, but if you read the quote that says, one of the key things about the program is we want our clients to feel accepted. And I always say it's how a person is treated when they come into our building. Customer service is a huge factor in bringing people back. People that have been prone to stigma and being called all kinds of names, making them feel like they're less of a person than they are. When they come here, they don't feel like that. We ask them, hey, how do you feel today? What has been able to grow and how much are we have? So, it's, again, Brian was very reticent about talking to us at first because he was just like, oh, here's somebody else who's come to interview us and they don't know nothing about harm reduction. They don't know nothing about drug use. They don't know anything about what we really do. And then, my wife and I explained to him, my background of drug use, addiction, incarceration, and subsequent recovery. And his eyes lit up. He went off and Googled us, came back and said, I'm all in, guys. And he introduced us to an amazing amount of people. Just an amazing amount of people that, were open and willing to talk to us and sort of talk about what Flint Wellness has done for them, what the access to syringes and access to harm reduction, all that sort of stuff was like. But this picture really sums it up to me because, Brian was talking about what it was like to be a service provider and to provide those services and what it was like for people going there. And this kind of looks like someone going up to an ice cream truck and buying ice cream and being really happy about it. But what they are is they're getting harm reduction supplies to keep their life safe, to be, in a safe space. And he's providing that for them and he's smiling and he's happy and she's got a mask on, but you can tell in her eyes that she's smiling and she's happy. And that for me was is the key point of this. It's like, you got to make people feel good no matter where they're at, is to make them feel good because that's what makes them keep coming back. When we stigmatize, when we put people down, when we make them feel like they're worthless, they never come back. And that's what happens so often. So, this picture really sums that up to me. It's a really powerful picture, I think, because it shows what Brian is a service provider and his client feels like when they go there to get what they need from harm reduction services. Do you want to move on a little bit? And from that project, I mean, I've done a number of projects, that have come up and as, around harm reduction, needle exchanges, that sort of stuff, syringe exchange. But this is a project from Vital Strategies and, we had it in this huge banner, which is 45 feet long and 6 feet tall. It's in Brooklyn. We put it up in Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is a very, very well populated area in Brooklyn. And this is right next to the five-a-side soccer fields. And all day, all night, weekends, there's people walking past that. And this for me is a key thing for advocacy, art advocacy, and getting messages to the public, because we can easily live in the bubble of harm reduction and, people who think like us and pat each other's backs and say, hey, that's really great. But how do we change the mind of that people who's on the fence? How do we change the mind of people who don't know what harm reduction is? People who don't know what Narcan is. People that don't know what harm reduction means in any way, shape, or form. And so that's why we did this. We took this, made this huge big banner, put it up. You can see the Manhattan skyline right behind it. And these are from the 109 interviews and photographs, portraits that we took of different people in the 4 different states we were working with. And this project will go on into other states. We took one quote and one portrait and put it up on the wall. And, this is what I think is the best thing to do, is to take your art out into the street and make it art and advocacy and public relations and get people to engage with it, because people need educated, they need told, and they need to understand that people who work in harm reduction and people that do this sort of stuff are not what they expected. People have been influenced by media and the use of imagery and quotes that are, you know, gives the public a false information about what vital strategy, what we've done. And that's what there's a great thing is about vital strategies, is that they've given us this ability to engage with people across these different places and put this up in New York, where people are coming along, looking at it, engaging with it, understanding, you know, what harm reduction is and how it helps people, and that, you know, these are real people. They could be your neighbors, they could be your friends. Some of them are drug users, some of them are advocates, some of them are peer support people, some of them are recovery coaches. It's right across the board, and it's everyday people doing what they can to help people who are drug users and addicts find, you know, a way of being out there and not being stigmatized. I think that's kind of it. I don't really want to go on too much. I'm going to leave it for questions and stuff like that. But if we want to move on, I think I've been at it for 7 or 8 minutes anyway.
Thank you, Graham. That was wonderful.
All right. Thanks, Nigel.
Next up, we've got Violet Modi. Violet, if you'd like to introduce yourself when you're up on the screen, and then, oh, no, apparently we're skipping Violet. Let me just skip on quickly then. We might come back to her if she reappears. In that case, we've got me. Okay, I'm normally a portraiture photographer. I do a lot of portraiture around harm reduction workers and around harm reduction activists. But this session, I'm going to be talking about stock photography, which sounds really dull and really weird, and it kind of is dull and weird, but we see it all the time. And this is the kind of image that we normally see. We see this on newspapers, we see it in articles on the internet, we see the worst possible images. This one is, I like to think of this as somebody has been described drug taking and then not actually been described how anything works. So we've got a substance being cooked on a spoon and then smoked through a rolled up note, rather than all the way that you might expect those things to be used for snorting and injecting and everything else. We also have the usual large pile of flour or sugar next to it, because everybody who uses drugs obviously keeps their drugs in a huge pile on the table with a 5 ml syringe that's half full of something that looks like it was never the substance that's on the table. And then we get things like this, which is really, anybody that's done work with people who inject, you know that this isn't the way that somebody injects. You don't inject in that direction. So this is the kind of stock photography that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing stuff that's bad. It's clearly been made by people that have never done anything around drug use and have never worked with people who use drugs. So what we did was we were asked by Drug Science and Exchange Supplies asked me to do some photos that could be used for stock photos on the Drug Science website initially, but also with the idea of expanding beyond that and producing a body of work around injecting and other forms of drug use that would be accurate. It would have harm reduction messaging kind of woven into it. And then the idea is that we will then put that onto the stock image websites for free use. So places like the BBC, places like different newspapers could use these images for free. They're not going to have to pay Getty a load of money. So they're more likely to use our images than their images because they don't have to pay for them. So this is preparation of heroin, correct filter technique. We've got the appropriate stuff that's around. There's no huge piles of white powder everywhere. And the decision was made that we would photograph these in the same kind of way that I would do a portrait photography. So the lighting is very similar. The way that it's edited is very similar. And again, that came down to making sure that the equipment that's there is the right stuff. So on the image that I showed you earlier, it was a huge syringe that's being used for a very small amount of liquid. Nobody that's injecting heroin or the drugs like that are going to be using those kind of huge syringes to, just inject normally. So we've got a nice little 30 gauge syringe here. We've got the kind of cooker that you see given out in needle programs. We've got acidifiers. So in the UK, our heroin needs to be broken down with an acidifier, as opposed to US heroin that quite often doesn't need to be acidified. So we've got the right equipment that's there and this is it's almost like nudging the harm reduction messages. It's not in your face, but it's just nudging those harm reduction messages. So it's not a huge dessert spoon full of like a random powder. And then we've got, again, with the injecting being in the right direction. I know it might not seem, it may not seem a huge deal when you think an image on top of a newspaper, but having worked in a needle program before, if somebody is totally naive to injecting and they haven't got people to show them, then they will go to forms of public media to see how things are done. And if the images that they're coming up with, when they go to websites, when they go to news sites, when they go to even some drug sites I've seen using images that have got really dangerous practices, then they're going to pick messages up from that. So the idea is that we would then be putting these out there as a resource for everybody. And I do think that it's something that those of us who are photographers within this kind of world need to be doing more about, thinking about what in your collection could be pushed towards stock photography for use on these sites that's more accurate and more non-stigmatizing portrayals. But yeah, that's me. And now we're on to Craig. There you go, sir. Over to you.
Okay, well, thanks ever so much for HRI to invite me along. I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as a photographer. The photographs over a long period of time, and a lot of those connected to the work that we all do. So it's a real privilege to be able to come along and talk to you. So, like that slide says, the theme across the three images is one around identifying the unknown harm reductionists. I think, on reflection, one of the things that's been that I found myself doing over the last 20 odd years is talking to people who passionately agree with me and people like me about the work that we do. So very, very good at preaching to the converted, I think. And then when I was given the brief around these photographs, one of the things that I thought about was the amount of people that control work that wouldn't describe themselves as harm reductionists. Some people, certainly two pictured in this series of three images, heard of the term, and yet they provide a huge amount of both of direct service delivery to people by proxy. Secondly, the having been engaged in the work through the connection with myself and people like, they've been really instrumental in kind of pushing forward the message around harm reduction. So the first person we've got up on screen there is Lisa. Lisa is one of about 20 or 30 people that work for an organisation called GenU in Geelong in Victoria, Australia. And what Lisa's doing there, packs that go inside one of our vending machines, is sterile injecting equipment to the community across the 24-hour window, which has been really useful during COVID. And the most remarkable thing, I think, is when, from my point of view, we engage and perform a task for us. And I thought it would be as simple as engaging the organisation, paying the bill, and kind of moving on. And what I did find initially, and certainly when I went back to take these photographs, the level of interest and involvement in kind of where their work goes, who it benefits. They were deeply involved in both, you know, the pride in kind of what they were doing. Secondly, kind of wanting to understand the importance of the work, the needle syringe programs, the importance of sterile injecting equipment, and then how they pass that on to people that are in their orbit. So I think one of the lessons that's been really good for me is that we need to broaden our church, so to speak, and engage more people in our conversations. Harm reduction feels like a very, very small community to me in terms of both what happens in my state, but secondly, kind of across the world now, we're so well connected to one another that it's very easy to find yourself in an echo chamber. So that was, and where that to. If I could have the next slide, Nigel. Excellent. So this is Hayley. So Hayley's the second of unknown harm reductions. Hayley did know what the term was. I hasten to say, in case she is listening, but worked for an organisation called Nimi Towards Home Plus in Geelong. And Nimi's staff are one of, you know, tens of thousands of people around the world, I suppose, that go out and perform assertive kind of outreach into homeless communities. And the thing that kind of stood out for me when I was talking to Hayley and Hayley's colleagues about the work that they do and trying to find where that link was towards harm reduction is, and I think this will resonate with anyone that's been involved in the work over any period of time, is that we all have either a small amount of money or next to no money at all, and that's it's certainly in terms of homelessness, it's distressing for the people that they're supporting, distressing for the staff when they're out regularly and they turn up empty-handed. But one of the things they did say to me was, the only thing that we have to offer is ourselves, and we continue to offer ourselves, and we continue to show up with honesty and consistency, and make no false promises, and engage with people as who we are. The only thing we have to offer is ourselves, and we do that in a really consistent way. And I thought that really stood out for me in terms of kind of the connection to harm reduction, in how we continue to, in spite of kind of funding difficulties and trying to run a service on the smell of an oily rag, or less than that sometimes, and volunteering our time to try and make sure that we can kind of connect into communities, that we do that consistently, and we do that of ourselves. And just finally, before we move on to the last slide, one of the things that they did say, what Hayley did say to me, is and I'm sure lots of people have had this conversation with people connected to them, and this is where that link is to how we kind of explain harm reduction to the general public, is I don't know how you do that work. So, you know, finding herself in conversations and being and having people reflect back, I don't know how you go out and do that work every day. And it made me wonder about the alternative. What is the alternative to that? What if nobody does that? What if nobody does this work? And I think so many people are doing the work without really knowing that they're doing it, and how they describe that to the people that are in their circles is how harm reduction messages are carried forward. So the last person on the slide here is a good friend of mine, a man by the name of McKinnon, who I met through harm reduction, who wouldn't describe himself as a harm reductionist in any way, shape or form, wouldn't describe himself as an abstentionist either. He's a man that's in recovery and has and understands that both of those positions are equally valid and they sit on the same continuum. And so Greg has been running radio shows for nearly 20 years now, community-based radio shows that reach out to a lot of people in regional Victoria, where opioid overdose deaths are incredibly high. And he has always provided the space for me to be able to reach into a community that I would otherwise never be able to reach, never be able to speak to. Excuse me, just one second. So Greg kind of provides what I think a bridge between harm reduction and abstinence-based services. He kind of he creates opportunity within radio shows for myself and people like me to meet with people that maybe have opposing views, to talk to a community about kind of our philosophical differences, and essentially kind of find where we dovetail and find the bits that connect us, which is around kind of well-being. So Greg has provided this show. I'm trying to think about kind of the demographic and how that relates to kind of the brief around the photographs, because it was one of the things that stood out for me at the very beginning, is the show that Greg currently provides, of which we are live streaming a show at the same time to coincide with the conference about the work that HRI have done and around harm reduction as well, which is when we took these photographs. He reaches an area which has got the highest density of opioid prescribing in Australia at one point, and consequently the overdose deaths around that. Greg is a proud carrier of naloxone and promotes that at every opportunity, regardless of kind of his position around his work. So the final thing that I would like to say, and this relates a little bit back to what Nigel was talking around, how do we change the narrative around harm reduction and the narrative around injection drug use, and this idea around stock photography. I unapologetically took all of these photographs with a smartphone. None of these are taken with an expensive camera. I think there are lots of us that are frequently taking pictures as we walk about our everyday life. And I think we can engage the people that we work alongside, the people that access our services, to be part of that narrative themselves. I think as someone that's got an interest in taking photographs and an interest in photography, I think it's kind of upon us to kind of share that with the community that we work with and encourage them to find ways of expressing their creativity and their lives and how harm reduction is meaningful to them. I think if I can take some photographs with, on my telephone and share these across a conference platform like this, I think anyone can do that. And I think it would be the way that we can start changing the narrative around harm reduction. And that's probably about it from me.
Wonderful, good stuff. Okay, we move on to Sandra Caligaro. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Sandra has been doing photography work in Kabul for a number of years. Over to you, Sandra.
Yes, hi, I'm here. So yes, as Miguel told, my name is Sandra Caligaro. I'm a French photographer, so I'm really sorry for my broken English. So the work the three pictures I'm presenting today is a part of a bigger work about a project that I call Demazing, showing the daily life of drug user, heroin user mainly, in Kabul. And it has been produced between 2007 and 2008-9, I will say. But today and very important, it's the very first story and topic I covered, and when I arrived in Afghanistan. So it has been a way to understand and to start to understand Afghanistan with this story. So today I'm going to focus about Musa. Musa is was a young Afghan 18 years old, and I'm going to present three pictures I took of him. I say was because unfortunately he died a while ago, and I mainly stopped, to work about drug user when after his death. So on the first picture, we can see it's a portrait of him when a few months after he arrived in the squat. All the picture I took, all the picture I took at this time was has been taken in the ruins of a former Soviet cultural center in Kabul, the capital city of Afghanistan. And in these ruins, a lot of drug users were squatting. And Musa is just came back, not just, but came back like a few months before from Iran. In Afghanistan, a lot of during the different wars, a lot of Afghan, flew, as left Afghanistan for Iran, and but then when the Taliban former regime falls, they came back or they were expelled. So these Afghans, were called returnees. So Musa was one of these returnees, and as many Afghans, he started to take heroin in Iran. And so when he has been expelled, and he arrived in Afghanistan, in Kabul, without knowing the country he was from, and with no family. So he was living in the squat in Demazang, and was taking heroin, smoking mainly. And at this time, Musa was still, young and kind of fresh. We could see like colors, pink colors on his face. And so the second picture, it's him still, Musa, but a few weeks after the first picture has been taken. I think he was at this time he was not only taken heroin. He started to take crystal meth, and this picture has been taken in the place, in the squat, in the main room, where users were joining to buy and to smoke heroin. And he's shaved because he was catched by police a few days before. So, and the police, when they catch the drug user, they wash them and shave them. I mean, it's more a way to shame them than a way to clean them. So when people are shaved, we know that they have been catched by police, and it's really a way to shame the user. And so, as you can see, on this picture, he's not the same young guy. He has completely changed, and he's completely lost, and you can see in his eyes, the despair, and it's really, I mean, it's really difficult, to talk about this picture, because there is nothing more than to say. we can see everything on the picture. So, and maybe we can go, you know, to the next one. The next picture is showing him. We can again, you know, and we can see a few weeks after. We can see that his face has still changed, you know. By the way, you can see that it's still, you know, he doesn't have any a lot of hair, so it's only like maybe like 2 weeks or less than a month after he was after the previous picture. So and his face has changed, you know. Again, you know, we can see like edema in his eyes, and he's talking with a net worker from the NGO MDM, Doctor of the World, who was the only NGO working on harm reduction in Afghanistan. There was like detox center in Afghanistan, but Doctor of the World MDM was they were the only one working. Trying to work on harm reduction and trying to introduce methadone in Afghanistan. And so they were visiting. I don't remember, this picture has been, you know, taken like 15 years ago. They were visiting the center like maybe 2-3 times a week, and they had as well a center where user could come to wash, to eat, to have a kind of medical care, to have like information about harm reduction, to get like clean syringe, and for the one who were ready to get some methadone. So, but unfortunately, this center has had to close because in Afghanistan the methadone, it was really difficult to change the mind of people and population, and methadone, it was really difficult as well to bring methadone in Afghanistan. And finally the government didn't allow methadone anymore. So yes, it was like it was a disaster for the one who started, you know, to get to take methadone. By the way, and I think Naim, so the head worker on the right, was under methadone at this time, and I got news recently, and apparently since this time he died as well, because he relapsed after, you know, the methadone was not allowed anymore. So I'm sorry, they are like kind of art picture and not happy end story. So, but yes, here it is, the story of drug user in Afghanistan, but it's now it's even worse, because like 15 years back, all these users they could stay in the ruins of this former Soviet center, but this ruins has been completely destroyed now, and a new building, you know, has been built in this place. So it's even worse now, because they don't have like a proper place, and they are using drugs under a bridge, the foot in the water and in the mud. It's really even terrible that it used to be, and the number of users has really has grown. Yes, so yes, this is the story of Musa. Who, yes, Musa, 18 years young Afghan.
That's wonderful. As Jay said in the chat, they're amazingly moving images that you've taken of him there. Yeah, they are beautiful images. The light on them is just beautiful and sublime. Apparently, Violet is back. So if we could just take these slides off just for a second, Lucy, and then I'll just reset back to Violet's. Hi, Violet. Let me just get your slides back up. There we go. So Violet is going to talk about Photo Voice and a project that she's been involved with. Off you go. I think we've lost her again. She's coming in on a really bad internet connection. So if we get her back, we'll go back to those slides. But for now, let's have a look at some of the questions. If we can have everybody back in for a bit. Lovely. Thank you all so much. That was an amazing session. Couple of questions that I've seen come up in the session. Just one to deal with quickly is from Feline. You've said that you really like the photos that I did, and where can you find those? I'm going to put them up on my website, which is nigelbrunston.com, in the short term. In the longer term, especially when we've got a few more, hopefully by December, I'm going to be submitting them to places like iStock Photo and all of the usual photo websites, but there'll always be ones on my website as well, and they'll be marked up as free for anybody to use on that particular section on my site. Lee Collingham said that talking about your work, Graham, and the public display that you did, that the UK really misses out, and we don't get much in the way of photography or photo campaigns in public spaces. I know that this is something that you think is really important. How could we do more with that, other than I'm very aware that I need to go out and put photography in public spaces?
It's the same here. You don't see much of it at all. You know, I would love to see billboard campaigns about naloxone and, you know, all those other things, you know, syringe exchange, you know, everything. But, you know, number one, it's getting funding to do these sort of things. And number two, it's like getting the space to put them there, you know. And I've done a number of things, but it's also, it's difficult. It's hard work. It looks easy at the end of the day when you see it out there and think, oh, that was easy. They just threw it up. But, you know, there's a lot to jump through. There's funding. There's like collaborating with people. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff goes on in that, you know. It would be great to be able to do, I would love to do an outdoor campaign, you know, with images and text like we did at, you know, at the Brooklyn Bridge Park, which was one banner, but actually do it on billboards next to freeways and bridges so that people can see and people can say hashtag and, you know, all the rest of it, so that people can go and find out what harm reduction is, what syringe exchange is, what naloxone is, because even people that I know, they have no idea. You know, and unless you educate the public and take that message out to the public, you're just really living in a bubble. And that bubble's fine, but it doesn't change people's minds. And we need to change people's minds, and that's really important.
And the weird thing is, Lee that's asked the question, we have actually had a public billboard campaign here for naloxone, and Lee was one of the faces on that campaign. So we've got.
And I was in Scotland recently, and they had a naloxone one on the side of bus stops.
Yeah.
It didn't have a great images. It had a lot of text, but it was out there. But I just think it's just really important. I mean, the new data from America came that 100,000 people in the last calendar year had died from overdoses, mostly fentanyl. So, fentanyl testing strips, naloxone, all that sort of stuff is so important right now because people are dying every day.
Do you think it's stuff that we need to do in big, expensive ways, like producing billboards, like producing the thing that you did in the park? Or is it something that we can do in almost like a more guerrilla way? Like, I mean, one of the things I've been thinking of is putting prints up of people with information on the back of the prints and just leaving them around town, almost putting them up for people to take away as like guerrilla prints almost.
I think that's a good idea. I think it's everything. I think it's absolutely everything. But it's also educating the media in the way they address these things and talk about these things, because even here in America, it's just like this whole thing about like if a cop touches fentanyl, he's going to OD and he has to wear plastic gloves. It's just it's bonkers. So it's just like educating people, and the media and movies and music has a lot to answer for, I think, in the way that they portray and talk about these things, because they don't understand either because they've not been educated. So it's about educating people as to, what harm reduction is, what naloxone is, what, syringe exchanges, all these sort of things, because they have it in their mind from watching The Wire or whatever about what a certain thing is. And that's their go-to. And it's like, where do they go? Like with your images for, say for drug use or whatever, it's like, where do they go to get better information instead of the bad information that's out there?
Yeah.
There's certainly need for, like I take kind of like more guerrilla approaches to kind of try to get to community, but there is certainly a need for larger scale information campaigns. I think one of the best parallels to that is in Australia. There's been they've been working incredibly hard to bring down the road toll death and have done really well. So an organisation, the Transport Accident Commission, have free advertisements on television, they have billboards, they have lots of messaging, really like good imagery, confronting video, short snappy sentences, and they are everywhere. And since 2009 is the road has been going down. Interestingly and distressingly, 2009 was around about the time that overdoses hit the road toll, and that disparity has grown ever since. More and more people dying of overdoses and less people dying on the roads, which is great. I think about kind of the Transport Accident Commission have around advertising, around health promotion, around those sort of campaigns, to put billboards up, to have advertisements on TV. And then I think about some of our International Overdose Awareness Day for these messages, and it's me and lots of people like me sitting around trying to think about how we can approach this, trying to get away with some colour printing in the morning before the boss comes in. And that's our parallel. And then you think about, how well they have done with lots of money behind this in people dying unnecessarily on the roads. The disparity coming more and more people dying of overdoses. And if we had a similar investment, I wonder whether or not we would see a similar change. So I think there is definitely a good cause to kind of do some more on the ground kind of messaging to people, but I think we do need much bigger campaigns like Graham was talking about, and like Graham's banner in Brooklyn on the Brooklyn Bridge. It's about putting things in the way. I think putting art that conveys the message in the way of people is what we need to be considering, as opposed to targeting our messages. We need to put this sort of stuff in front of people.
Can you hear us, Violet? No. Okay. Sandra, with your work in Kabul, how is that work, or how was that work, and how is your ongoing work in Kabul? How is that shared with the public? Is that via just your website, or the newspaper articles that you get involved with, and those kind of commission pieces?
This work, you know, it has been published in a few newspaper, and but not that much, because the picture, it was a bit difficult to publish them. They are not like super graphic, but it's a difficult topic. But it's with this picture that I could enter in my photo agency, because the editor saw the work, and he really liked it, and so I was really young photographer. I was 25 when I took this picture, so I started with this story, and I got I entered the agency with that. But this picture, I have to say, it's really important to say not all of this picture, but some of this picture, and a lot I took about Doctor of the World working, about their activity with the NGO and with the peers, has been exhibited in the Ministry of Public Health for the 8th day, first December 1st. In 2000, I don't remember if it was 2010 or 11, but some, yeah. So it has been exhibited in the alley of the garden of the Ministry of Public Health, with there was like as well user and peer talking, and sharing experience about being a user in Afghanistan. And it was, I mean, the problem comes from the government people, but it was a lot of people were quite of interested by to see to listen experiences. Yeah. And as well, really another, last, important part of this work is that the first picture we see about Moussaïf as a portrait. And when I was taking picture of the user, I was as well taking like this kind of nice portrait, and I was printing this picture, and I was giving them to the user, because as at least, like, it's not a compensation, but at least to something that they were giving me a lot, so I wanted to give them something. So it was obviously, as a journalist, as a photographer, it's difficult. You can't pay, you can't pay the people. I couldn't pay for their drugs, obviously, neither. So I was taking like nice picture of them, and I was giving printing and giving them, and generally they were kind of like surprised to look quite good, with the nice lighting, and it was like a bit like to give them a small, like, not hope, but a small, like a better image of themselves, because in drug user in Afghanistan, they are really they are really like the bad people. They are really seen like really like the really like the worst people ever. So at least by giving them this nice portrait, I will try to to reinforce the picture of they had about themselves.
That's good. It's a good way of doing that. You said there's a couple of points that have come up. There's because Lee Collingham's put that they did a set of images back in 05, and that because those photos that they did in 05 were silhouetted, they lost impact. And we've also got Jay asking about with the stock imagery whether or not it's hard hitting enough for press places to use. Do you think that photos that we produce when we're taking, if we're taking photos of people who have used drugs or are using drugs, that society almost expects them to be hard hitting? I know most of my portraiture isn't. Most of my portraiture is very simple portraits, that quite similar to some of yours, Graham, where it's you're just showing a person, and unless you put a description there, nobody's going to know. And I tend to put activist or advocate as a descriptor for everybody. So do you think that society almost expects, if it's a person who uses drugs, it's a horrible picture? And like you said, Sandra, you were taking nice pictures of them as well as the hard-hitting pictures. So is this something that society is expecting? That's to everybody.
I think. Do you want to answer, Sandra? You go first.
No, go. After, just I wanted to say, when I say like a nice and not nice picture, I mean it's that because by a nice picture I mean a picture that the users they like, about them, like it wouldn't have any sense for them to have printed a picture where they were like injecting themselves or smoking, because they don't care about this kind of picture, but this report, the reporter style picture. So that's why I was like giving them a picture that that could be at least useful for them. So, and then I let you answer for the I just wanted to add that, and it's not thanks.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a place for both. It's just that we've been saturated with those other pictures of people using, and I feel it's a responsibility of photographers and reporters and the media and stuff like that. If you're going to show that picture, if you're going to show the problem, you need to show the solution. You can't just keep showing the problem again and again and again and again, because that's what's embedded in people's minds. The junkie under a truck shooting up in their neck is what the go-to is. But if you present a solution like harm reduction or treatment or recovery or whatever it might be, you're presenting something else as well as that one. So, there is a place for that sort of imagery, but if that's the only imagery, it's absolutely problematic, because you need those other things. Now, I've photographed people using drugs and many times. And I've photographed myself using drugs, and the only ones I've ever shown are the ones of me using drugs, because I feel that ethically it's really easy when people are on drugs to get them to say yes to anything. It's really easy to take a picture of someone or be around drug users and say, "Going to take some pictures, is that okay? Have a hit." And they go, "Yeah, sure, man." And then you've got their image, and for me, who was in a situation of drug taking for many years, or in crack and heroin, I took a lot of pictures of people that I was around, including myself, on a crappy little point and shoot, which I've, and I decided not to show any of the pictures of the people that I was around, because ethically I felt it was wrong. Even though they said it's fine and let me take the pictures, these were people who were, some of them were dead, but a lot of them were okay. They were trying to get their lives back together, specifically the women who were trying to get their kids back and get their lives back together, were in treatment programs or trying to get into a recovery program, whatever. I just felt like, the internet now has a way of finding people. They will find the worst picture of you imaginable somehow. And I just feel that, it is problematic. I've seen so many pictures of Kensington in Philadelphia that are so problematic to me and so stigmatizing, it's not even funny. I mean, so I gravitate towards showing drug users and peer support people and advocates and people in recovery and people who've lived through with life experiences as being real people, because at the end of the day, we are real people. We might have made bad choices, we might have gone down a different route than other people, but at the end of the day, we're human and we're vulnerable, and when people attack us, we feel the same pain. You know, when people put you down, we feel the same pain. Just because you're a drug user or you've been using drugs or you're in a certain situation doesn't mean that people's words don't hurt and people's labels don't hurt, because they do.
Yeah, I think there's a really there's a need for honesty in terms of how these how people are captured, because it's a broad church. Like I said earlier on, you know, there's all different forms in how drug use occurs in different people's lives. But the really interesting thing, picking up on what Graham said, is there is a difference between consent and informed consent. And I think there's a lot of responsibility we have in terms of addressing the issue around informed consent when we're talking about something like drug use, and certainly kind of like capturing it. And like Graham said, it becomes immortal. You know, when you kind of capture these images, you know, and we think we have control over this. But Nigel, you would know as well as anybody in terms of the amount of stuff that you have created or in harm reduction that it's no longer yours anymore. You know, it's on the walls, different walls around the world. You know, I remember you and I chatting, and you seeing the back wall of our needle syringe program, and half of it was adorned with things that you'd created 6-7 years ago.
I've walked into conferences and seen my photos on T-shirts.
So this is the thing around what Graham was saying, around, you know, the responsibility we have in making sure that what we do capture is captured in the way that the people depicted have control over as much as they can, and being very certain about where that might end up. So I think the issue of informed consent around photography that involves drug use in people's lives, like any photography that's whilst not intrusive, it kind of focuses in on people. I think we have to be really, really careful around that.
We're coming into like the last chunk of this session. One thing that I know I've spoken about with Craig before, Graham, you raised, Sandra, you've raised in our email correspondence before, and also as part of this session, is the bereavement aspect of being a photographer with a community. I mean, I work within harm reduction, and I have privileged access to a number of people who are peer workers and workers within harm reduction that I photographed over the years. Same for you, Graham. Craig, you do that kind of work. And Sandra, you did this amazing work in Kabul. And we've all got photographs of people who've died. I know I now get messages off people when somebody dies, quite often before the news has broken, saying, have you got any photos of this person? How as photographers and people doing this work, do you deal with those aspects on a daily basis? Or is it something that you just try and put in a box and push over there out of the way? I eat a lot of toast. For me, I push it down into my belly and I eat toast and keep it quiet. But how do we deal with these kind of aspects? Because this is something that harm reduction workers deal with all the time. I mean, you, Craig, you're a day-to-day harm reduction worker. You deal working in an overdose situation.
Yeah.
You deal with this kind of stuff all the time. So how can we deal with this better?
Yeah, I think one of the what we're doing right now, I think one of the things that makes this easier to, whilst not reconcile, but to sit alongside is recognizing the value of it. You know, when you were saying that, Nigel, around when people contact you, when someone has passed away and asking you for images, I think one of the things that comes out of this is you know, I've seen some of the images that you have shared around people that the harm reduction community has lost over the years, and the power that they have had, and the way that they have enabled people to connect and to reflect back on the importance of, you know, the giants whose shoulders we all stand on. You know, and I think there is something that's really. I think there's a lot of power in that. I mean, I like you said, I've got lots of images collected over the years of people that aren't with us anymore. I don't have any simple answers to that. I think it's anyone that works in harm reduction, living with people that are living with the reality that people aren't going to be with us. Some people aren't going to be with us is a day-to-day kind of challenge. But I think these kind of communities, these opportunities to talk about that aspect of the work, and being able to use the images that are being created to spread messages to people around the importance of the work that people have done and how we are carrying that kind of work forward and continuing the work. I think there's some really importance in that, and that always feels like a bit of a panacea to me. You know, when I think about, because I find the work challenging and really difficult some days after having been doing it for so long. I think there's something really powerful in that.
Graham?
Yeah, I mean, I find it kind of difficult as someone who's been a very active drug user for over a decade, and, you know, shooting heroin every day, smoking, doing all that stuff. You know, I saw a lot of people die at that time, you know, but in the haze of addiction, it was kind of one of those things that you just thought happened, you know. But now that I've been drug free for like a decade, you know, and a lot of them are people who, I don't know, I go from sadness to anger sometimes, because sometimes I think it's people that I think should know better, you know, are huge advocates of ways of saving lives, and then they die, and I'm just like, what the fuck? Sorry, I shouldn't swear, but, you know, I'm just like, how can that happen? You know, it's like, very recently, someone that I'd bonded with on this project, who'd been drug free for a long time and had a relapse and then OD'd, and he was one of those never use alone, always do this, always do that, and was preaching to everyone. The rundown effect of that is the community that he advocated for and worked with were totally devastated, because they were just like, he was the man. How can this happen to him? And it leaves them kind of vulnerable, because they find great difficulty trying to work out how that would happen to someone like that. But for me, it's like, it happens. Sometimes it's close friends, sometimes it's people I've only met a few times. It's like, but it's always heartbreaking to me. It's always heartbreaking. It's very, very difficult, you know, and it's, you know, I get angry sometimes. I get sad and angry. I get angry at people who know better, and I get sad about people that I think I could have done more for. You know, that might, maybe if I'd intervened earlier, maybe I'd seen that their drug use was so harmful that if I didn't do something, that was the way they were going to do it. And I see that in people. You know, I see that occasionally. It's like, you know, they need extreme help. You know, they really need to be, you know, I just, it's very, very difficult, and I take my hat off to everybody that works in that field, because it's fraught, and it's angst, and it's like precarious, and it's very, very emotional work. Yeah. You know, it's very, very emotional work, and, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult at the best of times. So, you know, I mean, I wish there were better solutions, you know, but talking to other people is really important about what's going on in that world, and who we advocate for, and who we're helping, and when things, you know, don't go the way we expect, or people don't act the way we expect, or things just go off the rails. But I think talking to other people is really, really important, because I think that, you know, when we when we isolate and keep all that stuff to ourselves, it's very dangerous. You know, it just emotionally, just in the way that we take these things. You know, when people die or there's a passing or somebody ODs, and even if they recover, it can be rough. You know, it can be rough. You know, so it's just like, how do you deal with that as a person when you're around that? And I think that, you know, you need a support network as well for people who are peers and advocates and all that sort of stuff. We need people like that need support as well. You know, because, you know, we're the linchpin between that world and this world, and, you know, we're somewhere in the middle, and it's tough waters to navigate sometimes, I feel.
Sandra, I know you've said that you stopped doing the photography project of the people using drugs in Kabul because of the bereavement issues that were coming up around it. Does that happen in your other photography work as well, obviously to a lesser extent, or is it something that you do think is possibly almost unique to this area of work?
Sorry, can you repeat? The network was bad. Can you just repeat just the last sentence?
You've said before about how you stopped doing your previous project because of the bereavement issues that had come up around it. Does that happen in your other photography work as much, or is it something which is obviously, because this is a group of people who are at a higher rate more likely to die, they're running a higher risk life, or do you think that this is something that's common to all photographers? I mean, my only photography work has been within this field. So.
I think, I mean, it's common to all photographers. I mean, to all kind of photography. Generally, I feel I'm protected by my camera till a certain point. And so for many years, you know, I could photograph and follow the daily life, the life and the death of this community of drug users. But as I was really touched by this young guy, Musa, for example, when he died, I don't know, I feel that something like it was I was at the end, you know, it was like, okay, I need to focus on something else. It was too painful, and but it depends, you know, who the loss, obviously, but it's the same, you know. It's not only about, you know, drug user harm reduction. It's the same. I feel the same, you know, in I mean, in Afghanistan, you know. I lost a lot of people that I know that died in the suicide attack. So it's and sometimes just, you know, sometimes it's okay. You can work. You can continue to work. You can continue to get the testimonies, and sometimes it's just, you know, you are just asking yourself, okay, what is my place, you know, what should I, what is the, I mean, what can I do, you know, to I don't know how to tell it, but yeah, sometimes you feel just so without any power, so powerless, and it's a difficult, you know, balance, you know, and to how to react, you know, in front of loss, you know. It's really difficult. Sometimes, yeah, generally I'm protected, you know, to my camera, unless, you know, something, you know, unless I start to really deeply affected and to really deeply touch, you know, and I'm not doing only, you know, in that case it's not I'm touched not as the photographer, but as the human being, you know, and as or the woman, or the, you know, and in that case, you know, it's really difficult, you know, to continue to work and to yeah, really difficult. But I think it's like, yeah, it's proper to a lot of, I mean, it's, yes, really any kind of photography.
because I realised that asking that question of you three and then answering it myself is kind of unfair. In my case, it's I think of the utility of the photograph. I even got to a stage now where there's certain photographs that I've taken, and as I'm taking them, there's one particular guy who died last year. As I was taking a photograph of him, and he sort of saluted as he was driving out in the needle exchange van. And as I took the photograph, I was like, well, that's the photo for whenever this person dies. And then he died within a year. And as I'm taking that photograph, I feel weird because the photography in me is like, I got the shot. The human in me is like, I'm an asshole, because I'm thinking about how to use this photograph, and I get a bit messed up in the head with it all, and then I just eat more toast and push those thoughts down again. In the chat, Jay Walker has asked, I'm aware of my own terminology at times surrounding photos. Do you think we should use we should not use certain terms like capture or take someone's photo, or sometimes good shot? Can people take offense to these terms? I find myself shying away from these terms, especially around delicate subjects and vulnerable people. Are these kind of terms that we use quite casually and we don't think about them in ways that they might have multiple meanings?
I try never to use the word.
You went really quiet there.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I tend not to use the word capture because I come from an analog world. That word so much, but I know that
You've gone really quiet again. I think, have you got your fan on in your room and your microphone's?
No.
No? Okay.
All right. It keeps on saying host has muted you.
I don't think we can still hear you. It's just very quiet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I tend not to use the word capture. Partly is that I come from a more analog world of photography, and partly because it's just not a word I like to use. Capture, it means entrapment, which is a word that I don't like very much. And so, I don't mind taking a picture, but, I like making a picture because you're sort of collaborating, that collaborative aspect of working with people means that you're making something that's with their consent and with, a lot of other things that go with it. So I like to talk about making pictures or making art or making statements as opposed to taking or capture or any of those other words. And shot and shoot are words that I try to avoid these days, given the gun culture in America. So, I try to go for make as much as possible. Make work, that's my terminology.
Cool. Yeah, it's nothing I don't really think about much. I don't think I use shot or capture at all. I think I'll say take or grab sometimes. Do you mind if I grab a photo of you? Because a lot of my photography work is done at conferences where I'm trying to grab people for and it's literally is grabbing people and taking them to a place that I know has got a blank wall or some good light. But yeah, it's an interesting. I think I need to think more about that terminology that I use and those words that are transferable words. We have no more questions in the chat.
Yeah, I can just, I just would like to just add something to end. Me, I often say, take a picture, and I know that I use this term, and I know that I take something. So that's why, like for this project with the user, that's why it was important to give, in return a picture, because I know that when I'm photographing, I take something. So I know it. So I don't have like too much problem to use it, you know. It is to use taking, you know, a picture, because I'm conscious of that, and so that's why even as a photographer working, you know, most of the time as a photo reporter or photojournalist, it's really important for me to give, you know, something back, you know, to the people I'm photographing. It could be like a picture, it could be my smile, it could be time, it could be like a chat. I mean, but something, yeah, in return.
I know well, a couple of years ago, back when we used to have like face-to-face meetings and be able to take photographs of people at conferences and stuff, I had a disposable Polaroid kind of camera that I could take photos, and I could, on the back of the camera, edit it into black and white, up the contrast, all the sort of stuff I do for my own photos anyway. So that I could then, if somebody has taken time to let me take photos of them, I could then, with that camera, take another photo, take it out, find the back, whatever. And then that way I felt that I wasn't, like this term, this take thing, it's like you're almost stealing somebody's time to do that. And I know from looking at my friends list on Facebook that at least 40% of them are using photos I took as their profile photos. So I know people get stuff back anyway, later on when the image gets shared, but there is this idea that at the back of your head that you are stealing something. I think it's, especially if you take somebody's time, I think is the thing. I think that that's a natural place to end. Thank you for putting that in there, Lucy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much.